Okay, part 2 of Jordan Peterson, a cut from the Rubin report, 14 minutes, 15 seconds. Jordan Peterson discusses Sam Harris's view on religion. Continued. Okay, here we go.
Now, and I find that quite interesting because, first of all, chimpanzees go to war. So, we could just lay that right on the table and say, well, so much for the religious theory. They're territorial. We're territorial.
Because factions and groups of chimps are violent towards one another for a host of reasons we probably understand a great deal about. Religion can't be the reason for our disagreements and problems in our world, right? I mean, who does he think he's talking to? I mean, this is just embarrassing.
You could consider religious sentiment as an aspect of territoriality, but the fundamental motivation for the battle is territorial. And that's grounded in, like you can see that in animals always. That was only discovered, the chimps went to war in about mid-70s, and Goodall suppressed it for quite a while because she thought maybe she had warped the chimpanzees by provisioning them, and so that they were manifesting abnormal behavior. But they were studied for quite a while.
That's an interesting point. I wonder if that's true. It sounds like something an actual scientist and naturalist and person who's willing to go into the field and do actual work would say. It's kind of a naturalistic Heisenberg principle operation going on there, theory. That's a real scientist. This is
quite a while, and they do raiding, and they'll wipe out another colony, no problem, and brutally. They seem to have absolutely no inhibitions on their aggression whatsoever. They'll tear them into pieces. And chimpanzees are about 6 times as strong as an adult male.
Okay. Chimps aren't 6 times stronger than an adult male. That's ridiculous. That's number one. And I'm happy to look that up, but 6 times an adult male is really strong. A grayback gorilla in his prime? Yeah, maybe. They won't have any check on the, what did he say? They're really aggressive. Oof, you mean when they go kill rival groups for food and females and territory? What are they supposed to do? Send them to college? I mean, I've watched every video publicly available of lions stalking and killing prey. Sometimes it takes 45 minutes for them to kill a warthog because they're eating it the whole time. And they are tough as nails. Okay, it is a brutal thing to watch. I don't find it brutal. But when you hear a pig squeal for 40 straight minutes while half his body is gone, you understand how the natural world operates. What are you talking about? So what?
They're super strong, and so when they let loose, they're vicious with no control. And so, unless you're willing to...
When they let loose, they're vicious without control. How do you know? How do you know what their level of control is? The fuck are you talking about? That is a open-ended, loose statement that means nothing.
To attribute religious sentiment to the chimpanzees, which I think you could to some degree, by the way.
How do we make that jump for a chimpanzee?
Well, because the precursors to religious belief are in place. So, for example, animals organize themselves into a hierarchy. You could call it a dominance hierarchy, but it's not exactly the right way to conceptualize it, because dominance sounds like...
So now, the natural world, which has hierarchies, newsflash, at least not in solitary animals, of which there are many. Bears, for example. No hierarchy in a Kodiak bear who's just tooling around looking for a meal. By the way, don't get in his way. You have no chance of getting in his way, but someone who's actually interested in animal behavior might. Or for that matter, someone like me who'd want to take a picture and see such a beautiful creature as closely and safely as possible. You're an idiot. I mean, this is hard to, it's hard to restrain myself, I have to say.
Power, right? And that's sort of the social justice warrior postmodernist claim that all hierarchies are based on power. But Frans de Waal, who's a Dutch anthropologist who studied chimps for a long time, has noted that the brutal chimp dictatorship tends to be unstable and end in a very violent, mean manner. Well, so if you're a brutal chimp leader and you're always tormenting everyone and you don't do any reciprocal grooming and you don't have any friends, then one day two chimps who are nicely bonded together, 3/4 your size, wait and ambush you and tear you into pieces.
Yeah.
And so one of the things de Waal has noted is that the stable chimpanzee troops tend to have a leader that's quite pro-social. A lot of friends, a lot of social bonds, a lot of mutual grooming. And so you can see even there, imagine that there are sets of hierarchies among chimpanzees,
Now
and there's different
hierarchies.
Principles of leadership at the top.
Different
Then
principles.
you can imagine a competition across time. Which
Gee, you
principle
think?
of leadership is going to produce the most stable and functional chimpanzee hierarchy? Well, that is exactly what does happen. And
Yeah.
so there's some shape that the top of the hierarchy starts to take, and you could think about that as the beginnings of an ideal. It's even more complicated than that, because let's say you get a state.
The beginnings of an ideal. The Big Bang. The beginnings of an ideal.
Stable hierarchy set up, and then this is what happens in human beings. It doesn't happen in chimps, or it does, but only to a limited degree. You get a stable hierarchy set up, and then there's some pattern of behavior that emerges that reliably moves men to the top of that. Okay, they leave more offspring. So what happens is that the male dominance hierarchy, the male hierarchy, forget about dominance, the male hierarchy becomes a selection mechanism. It promotes men to the upper ranks, and then the women peel off the top, because we...
Now he switches from chimps to men, and he discusses the mating habits of human females. I mean, dude, humans have been organizing for a long time, right? And now we have things like the Pentagon and the internet, and God, the roadways, the highway systems, grids to give us power, universities to learn, and I mean, what do you...
We know that human females do that. Chimpanzee females don't. They're promiscuous maters. The dominant males are more likely to mate with the females.
He uses the word promiscuous maters. I wonder if I wonder if the word is ever published in science to use the word promiscuous. They're not promiscuous maters at all. They have reproductive sex with a lot of different mates, perhaps, and it would, by the way, qualify a lot. What's a lot? It's terrible.
But that's because they chase the subordinates away. It's not because the females are choosy. So the reason I'm telling you this, it's really important.
Insults females. It's not because the females are females aren't choosy, huh? Female lions don't know how to be attracted to the biggest, baddest male lion with the most black hair on his mane, which means he's old and senior and a big, bad motherfucker. You're saying they don't know how to recognize any of that. They just go to the top. I mean, like one sex lives in a vacuum because it's not in the power structure. This guy is embarrassing.
Because imagine that there's a reliable pattern of behavior that will move you up a male hierarchy across time. Well, what that means is that men over time have become biologically adapted to that pattern. The hierarchy is there, it's stable, it exists across millions of years. And so it acts as a selection mechanism by promoting men. And so the men who have the genes that are most likely to get them promoted.
Yeah.
Put those genes forward.
Survival of the fittest,
we get more like the group ideal as we progress through time. Both
Survival of the fittest,
and culturally.
group think
and then we also
helps.
start to articulate that group ideal. And that's partly what a religion does when it's coming up with the idea of an ideal. There's a distinction made between countries that rule by the ruler, who's God, and countries that are ruled by God, who's not the ruler. Okay, so strip it for a minute of its religious language, and imagine this instead.
I mean, who doesn't know this? The creation myth of the Jews, which you probably think is more than a creation myth, all right, has value, cultural value. Of course it does, just like the creation myth of the Maasai warrior. Doesn't mean it's right. Doesn't mean it's helpful. Doesn't mean it promotes well-being. It means it's a beautiful story. Nothing more, nothing less.
Instead, imagine that what we consider God is the abstraction of the ideal by which people have to orient themselves to produce a functional society.
That is a dangerous phrase right there. I should replay that. He's basically saying people have to run the religion software to get anywhere. I mean, I disagree as firmly as humanly possible. That is beyond ridiculous. Let's hear that again.
And countries that are ruled by God, who's not the ruler. Okay, so strip it for a minute of its religious language, and imagine this instead. Imagine that what we consider God is the abstraction of the ideal by which people have to orient themselves to produce a functional society.
People have to orient themselves towards an ideal to create a functional society? Yes, but that would never include metaphysics because it's make-believe because no one knows it exists or not. Okay? So it's a black box. Okay? I don't care what the outcomes, but when you mix in the black box, the outcomes are meaningless because you don't know the weight, the impact, the future, etc. of an unclear variable. Unclear. It's a fucking black box. It's religion. It's all made up. They anathematize one another. There is no there. It is mental mind games, wish thinking, and is not connected with the physical universe, which is the only one we know to exist.
It's an abstraction, right?
So it's just sort of the basic underlying truth of how we are able to function as a group of people.
Yes, properly. And you can't identify it with any one person, because when you identify it with the person, then the system gets corrupted because the person gets inflated, let's say.
This would be like the Pharaoh, basically.
Yes, exactly, precisely like that. That's exactly that's the canonical story in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
Is the Pharaoh is the earthly ruler who demands everything that you should provide to God. What's God? Well, we can speak about it from an evolutionary psychology perspective. God is the idea of the abstract ideal, and you separate it out from the actual ruler, just like in our society. The idea of sovereignty is abstracted from the president, right? The president comes and goes.
So what? Yeah, and? Yes, it took 3.5 billion years to figure out that we could bestow certain control over the tribe for the overall betterment of the tribe. My God, ants do this, dude.
The sovereignty of the president remains. The sovereignty of the president is a very abstract idea because it's disembodied.
It's not abstract at all. It's totally clear. And they do it a million different ways, like putting a crown on his head and saying he's better than a man or more than a man, for example. I mean, that's the divine right of kings, for example.
Right? It's disembodied. Now, we were chimps, for God's sake. How long do you think it took us to figure out how to disembody the idea of
3.5 billion years
from the individual?
3.5 billion years.
Well, it was maybe up until maybe it took us till 150,000 years ago to start formulating them.
That's right.
You know, in some articulate
The Big Bang
way,
was
some abstract way.
14.8.
I think we could
billion.
recognize it before then, and the way you recognize it is through admiration. Right? If you meet someone that you admire, there's someone you want to.
Here it is. Science is great, people, but I don't know it that well, and I slander anybody who does, who cares, and admits all the time they don't know anything except their narrow bit, and here's what I don't know about it. Rather, why don't we idolize somebody? Yeah, that's it. But it can't just be a person, because then that's too personal. So we have to have admiration societies for make-believe, because that'll help. Because there's so much evidence of how much that has helped.
Imitate what it is, and imagine this pattern that will move you up the hierarchy. And then you see people who manifest different elements of it. And you see someone who manifests an element that you don't have, and something in you responds to that with admiration. It's unconscious, right? Because it pulls you towards them. It's not
It's conscious and unconscious. What the fuck are you talking about?
voluntary. You see that really with kids a lot when they hero worship someone and start to imitate them.
Right.
You know, but the same thing happens throughout culture.
Yeah.
I mean, people, if you think you learned anything there, please contact me and I'll direct you to honest communicators. I'll even connect you to much better God talkers. My God, I know dozens of them. I've heard dozens of them have discussions with the people I admire. And a lot of them, not a lot of them, a very rare few are worth talking to, actually. This guy literally not only has nothing to offer, he's a liar. He doesn't know science. If he does know science, he's characterizing it to prop up his own theology, which he's welcome to do. But you gotta stop blurring that line, buddy. And you certainly shouldn't be a college professor unless you're the chaplain or something. There's no reason for you to be there. I've passed two evolution sections of an AP bio test, advanced placement, which says almost nothing. Okay, all I'm saying is I got a 76 on 37 questions from a 2012 AP bio exam. Okay, and the ones I got wrong, whatever. So, because I'm just a fan of science, and I did well in biology over 35 years ago. So, I don't think he could get a 76. In fact, if he did score well, he has a lot more to answer for, because then he's really being dishonest. Everybody who listens to Jordan Peterson or listens to anyone else talk about evolution, whether in truth or in theology, as this gentleman does, should be able to do what I did on that AP bio exam, to understand what he's talking about when he mentions evolution. Because what you'll find out for yourself. You'll listen to a couple of evolutionary biologists who are wonderful communicators and writers. In the New York Times, for example. Yesterday or the day before, there was an article about these toucans, or whatever they are, these birds, that use tools and drum and have their own drum style to attract females. At least that's what they think is going on. I mean, this is the only bird that does this. This is one of the few animals ever, anywhere, to make actual music, other than humans. Calling into question our preconceived ideas about where music came from. Was it us making sounds to attract females, and the more mellifluous, whatever that meant, a million years ago, the better you were attracting females, and now we have song and dance today. Really good stuff to chew on. You're not going to get any of that here. You're going to get a shitty preacher confusing science and lying about scientists and what we know. It's a disgrace. Go do your own reading, or ask me. Don't take a word I'm saying as truth. Consider me totally full of shit, but just I hope I put a bee in your bonnet. Sam's Bulldog out.